"Erase it," Alpha Grant Mercer ordered, and the silver edge touched the only proof that Evelyn Hale had ever belonged anywhere. The entire Greyhaven pack stood beneath the moonlit arches of the census hall, silent enough to hear metal scrape across parchment. Evelyn watched 2 careful words disappear from the silver ledger, letter by letter, until her mother's chosen name became a pale scar on the page. No one looked at her. Not the elders who had watched her grow up. Not the servants whose children she had comforted through winter fevers. Not even those who had once whispered Evelyn when Grant was too far away to hear. "A wolf who cannot shift has no place in our bloodline," Grant declared from behind the stone table. His dark ceremonial coat carried the crest of Greyhaven, a silver wolf beneath a broken moon. "From this night forward, she will answer only when summoned. She has no family name, no rank, and no claim upon this pack." A quiet murmur moved through the hall. Evelyn kept her hands folded, though the small pendant beneath her collar had begun to burn against her skin. Her mother had carved Evelyn Hale into the back of it before dying, each letter uneven but certain. Grant could scrape ink from a royal record, but he could not reach the silver resting above her heart. "Tell them what you are," Brielle Mercer said from beside her father. She wore white velvet and a satisfied smile. Evelyn lifted her eyes. Hundreds of faces blurred beneath the torchlight, familiar and suddenly distant. "I am an Omega of Greyhaven," she said. Grant closed the ledger. "You are nothing of Greyhaven." The words should have broken something inside her. Instead, they settled into the silence where her wolf should have been, cold and heavy. For 22 years, Evelyn had waited for the creature within her to wake. She had endured every failed moon ceremony, every pitying glance, every accusation that her birth had offended fate. Still, when frightened children sought her hand, they calmed. When wounded animals hid from stronger wolves, they trusted her. Whatever Greyhaven called weakness had never stopped the helpless from recognizing kindness. Grant raised the ledger. Before the witnesses. "The record is corrected." The pendant flared hotter. Evelyn caught her breath as a voice, faint as wind moving through pine branches, whispered from somewhere she could not name. "Do not let them make you disappear." Her fingers closed around the silver charm. For the first time that night, she stood straighter. Grant noticed. His expression sharpened, but before he could speak, a deep horn sounded beyond the eastern wall. Every torch trembled. A second note rolled across the valley, followed by the distant rhythm of horses on the frozen road. The elders exchanged startled looks. Brielle's face lost its color. Grant turned toward the open doors as black banners appeared between the trees, each marked with the crowned wolf of Blackwood. "That is impossible," he whispered. The royal procession was not expected for 3 days. Evelyn stared into the darkness beyond the hall, where silver lanterns moved steadily closer. Then the pendant against her heart became warm instead of hot, almost like a hand closing gently over hers. The Alpha King had arrived early. The royal horns had not yet faded when Grant Mercer turned from the doorway and fixed his gaze on Evelyn. "Take her to the lower servants' wing," he said. "She is not to be seen." No one questioned him. The hall erupted into motion as elders straightened their robes, servants gathered the ceremonial silver, and Brielle hurried toward the upper chambers to change into a gown worthy of a king. Evelyn remained beside the closed ledger until Grant stepped closer. "You will stay out of sight until the royal party leaves," he said quietly. "If anyone asks who you are, you will say nothing." The pendant beneath her collar had cooled, but the whispered warning still lingered inside her. "Do not let them make you disappear." 2 servants escorted her through a narrow passage behind the census hall, past kitchens filled with rising steam and storerooms scented with cedar and dried herbs. No one touched her, yet every closed door felt like another wall being built around her existence. At the end of the corridor, Margaret Hale waited beside a small lamp. Her silver hair was pinned neatly at the nape of her neck, and worry deepened the lines around her eyes. "Evelyn," she said. The sound of her name nearly stopped Evelyn's breath. Margaret dismissed the servants with a calm glance, then led her into the healer's room and locked the door. Shelves of glass bottles lined the walls, glowing amber in the lamplight. "He erased it," Evelyn whispered. Margaret reached for her hands. "Ink is not memory. He said I belong to no one. Grant Mercer has said many things because he is afraid." Evelyn looked toward the single window. Beyond the frosted glass, Royal lanterns moved through the courtyard. Afraid of what? Margaret hesitated, then crossed to an old cabinet and removed a wooden box wrapped in faded blue cloth. Inside lay several small metal tags, each stamped with a name. Rose Bennett, Clara Wren, Hennicole. Names Evelyn had never heard spoken. They were Omegas of Greyhaven, Margaret said. Every one of them was removed from the silver ledger. Evelyn touched the nearest tag. Where are they? Gone. Sent away? Hidden? Or forced to live without a pact bond? Your mother discovered the pattern before you were born. The room seemed to grow colder. Why would Grant erase them? Because a wolf without a recorded name cannot inherit land. Question an alpha, or ask the crown for protection. Margaret placed the box in Evelyn's hands. Your mother believed Grant was building his power by making people vanish on paper. Evelyn stared at the names. Each belonged to someone who had breathed, hoped, and once answered when called. Why did she not tell the king? She tried. Margaret moved to the far corner and knelt beside a loose floorboard. Beneath it was a folded piece of parchment, yellowed at the edges. This was hidden the night she died. Evelyn carefully opened it. The page had been torn from an older ledger. A list of names ran down the center, all crossed out in silver ink. At the bottom, written in her mother's hand, were 4 words. Evelyn Hale is the last. Before Evelyn could ask what they meant, footsteps stopped outside the healer's door. A royal voice spoke from the corridor, deep and controlled. Open this room. The king wants every resident of Greyhaven accounted for. Margaret's hand tightened around Evelyn's wrist as the voice outside repeated the command. Open the door. Evelyn folded the torn ledger page and slipped it beneath her sleeve. Margaret lifted her chin, crossed the room, and turned the key. A royal officer stood in the corridor wearing a black cloak fastened with the crowned wolf of Blackwood. 2 guards waited behind him, their expressions calm but watchful. By order of King Nathaniel Blackwood, every resident of Greyhaven must be presented before midnight, he said. No exceptions. Margaret stepped aside before Grant Mercer could arrive and object. Evelyn followed her into the corridor, keeping the wooden box hidden beneath her apron. The entire estate had changed within minutes. Silver lanterns burned along the stone walls, horses stamped in the courtyard, and royal servants moved with quiet purpose through rooms that usually belonged to Grant alone. At the center of it all stood King Nathaniel Blackwood. He had not come dressed for celebration. His coat was plain and dark, his gloves dusted with frost from the road, and his silver eyes studied the estate as though every stone might be hiding a secret. Grant approached him with a practiced smile. Your Majesty, had we known you would arrive tonight, we would have prepared a proper welcome. I did not come for a welcome, Nathaniel replied. His voice was low, but the courtyard fell silent around it. I came because 12 names vanished from the royal census in 6 months, all from this territory. Grant's smile did not move. Clerical errors, perhaps. Names do not disappear by accident. Evelyn felt the pendant warm again. Nathaniel turned slightly, and for one impossible second, his gaze moved toward the passage where she stood. His expression changed. Not recognition exactly, more like surprise at a sound only he could hear. Deep within him, the shadowed wolf that had raged for years suddenly became still. Nathaniel had traveled nearly 200 miles through winter roads because the darkness inside him had worsened each time another name vanished from the kingdom. Royal healers called it an ancient curse. The oldest. Records called it a bond between the crown and the forgotten. Every person stripped of identity fed the silence growing inside the king. Yet now, in the middle of Greyhaven, that silence had shifted. A heartbeat reached him from beyond the crowd, steady and bright, and the shadows inside his chest drew back from it. Who is standing in that corridor? He asked. Grant turned too quickly. Only servants. Bring them forward. Evelyn's breath caught. Margaret gave her the smallest nod, but before they could move, a bell rang from the western tower. A young royal page hurried across the courtyard, pale with alarm. Your Majesty, the guest records are incomplete. There is a sealed chamber beneath the old archive. Grant's face hardened. Nathaniel looked from the page to the corridor, then back to Grant. Open it. The lower archive has been closed for years. Then tonight it opens. As the royal guards moved toward the archive stairs, Grant stepped close to Evelyn, his voice barely more than a whisper. You will return to the servants' wing now. Evelyn looked past him at the king. Nathaniel was already watching her. Their eyes met across 30 feet of torchlit stone, and the world seemed to hold its breath. The pendant became warm against her heart. Nathaniel's wolf whispered one word into the sudden quiet. Her. Grant stepped between Evelyn and the king before either could speak. The servants are needed in the western tower, he said, his smile fixed and cold. She will assist with the royal lanterns. Nathaniel's gaze remained on Evelyn for one heartbeat longer, as though he were listening for something beneath the noise of the courtyard. Then the archive doors opened, drawing every eye toward the stairs below. Grant seized the moment. He guided Evelyn through a side passage, his hand hovering near her shoulder without touching her. You have already been seen, he whispered. Do not make matters worse. Margaret tried to follow, but 2 Greyhaven attendants blocked her path. Evelyn clutched the wooden box beneath her apron as Grant led her up a narrow spiral staircase. The western tower had not housed servants in years. Dust covered the stone floor, and a single window overlooked the courtyard nearly 40 feet below. Grant opened an old storage room and pointed inside. Remain here until the king leaves. He ordered every resident to be presented. You are not a resident, Grant replied. You are not recorded at all. The door closed, and the lock turned. Evelyn stood in the darkness, listening to his footsteps descend. For a moment, fear pressed against her ribs. Then she remembered the hidden names in the wooden box. Rose Bennett, Clara Wren, Hannah Cole. Women made invisible because no one had dared to open a locked door. Evelyn moved toward the window. Below, royal guards carried records from the archive while servants raised silver lanterns along the courtyard wall. A young page in a blue cloak climbed a short ladder to secure the final lantern beneath the tower arch. He could not have been older than 12. As he reached upward, the old wooden support above him shifted. The lantern frame tilted, and the boy froze, gripping the ladder as loose stones began sliding from the arch. Evelyn shouted, but the thick glass swallowed her voice. No one below noticed. She turned to the door and pulled at the handle. It held firm. The warning inside her returned, clearer than before. Do not let them make you disappear. Evelyn set the wooden box down, found an iron fire tool beside the cold hearth, and pressed it beneath the rusted latch. The wood groaned. Once. Twice. On the third attempt, the lock gave way. She ran down the spiral steps, lifted her skirt above her ankles, and crossed the courtyard as the lantern frame dropped lower. Move away, she called. The page looked down, startled, and lost his balance. Evelyn reached him just as he stepped from the ladder. She drew him back beneath the covered walkway, shielding his head with her arms while the lantern frame landed several feet away in a burst of harmless sparks. The boy trembled against her. His eyes were open, but his breathing came too quickly. I cannot hear him, he whispered. My wolf is gone. Evelyn knelt and placed both hands around his cold fingers. Warmth moved through her palms, gentle and bright. Somewhere beyond his fear, she sensed a small wolf curled behind a closed door. A name rose into her mind like moonlight over dark water. Caleb, she whispered, though no one had told her. Your name is Caleb Rowan. Come back to me. The boy inhaled slowly. His eyes cleared. How did you know? Before Evelyn could answer, she felt the courtyard fall silent. King Nathaniel stood beneath the arch, watching her with silver eyes. He had seen the light fade from her hands. More importantly, he had heard the name that no Greyhaven record contained. Behind him, Grant Mercer stared at Evelyn as though the secret he feared most had finally awakened. For several seconds, no one moved. Caleb still held Evelyn's hands, his breathing steady now, while the last sparks faded across the frozen stones. King Nathaniel crossed the courtyard with quiet purpose and stopped beside them. Are you hurt? He asked the boy. Caleb shook his head. She found my wolf, Your Majesty. She called me by my full name, even though I never told her. Nathaniel looked at Evelyn. The shadows behind his silver eyes had gone strangely calm. How did you know? Before she could answer, Grant Mercer stepped forward. Forbidden influence, he said. The girl has always been unstable. Whatever you witnessed was a trick meant to deceive the crown. Caleb pulled closer to Evelyn. She saved me. Enough, Grant replied. His voice carried across the courtyard, summoning Greyhaven attendants from every doorway. Take her to the Royal Moon Hall. This matter will be judged before the pack. Nathaniel did not approve the order, but he did not stop it. He watched Evelyn rise, as though waiting to see whether she would lower her head. She did not. The wooden box remained hidden in the tower, but the torn ledger page rested beneath her sleeve, warm against her skin. Within minutes, the royal moon hall filled with elders, servants, royal guards, and every adult wolf of Greyhaven. Silver flames burned above the stone columns. Nathaniel took his place before the blackwood chair reserved for the crown, while Grant stood at the center with Brielle beside him. Evelyn was brought forward in her plain servant dress. Brielle's white velvet shimmered beneath the moonlight pouring through the high windows. "This is the girl who disrupted our census ceremony," Grant announced. "She has no recorded bloodline, no awakened wolf, and no lawful name. Tonight she used unknown magic upon a royal child." Murmurs moved through the room. Evelyn searched the crowd for Margaret, but could not find her. Brielle approached and noticed the silver chain at Evelyn's throat. "That pendant belongs to an old noble house," she said. "She must have stolen it." Her fingers closed around the chain and pulled it free before Evelyn could protect it. The small disc landed near Nathaniel's boots, turning once before the engraved side faced upward. "Evelyn Hale." Nathaniel read the name in silence. Grant's expression tightened. "The engraving proves nothing. She has used that object for years to pretend she is someone she is not." "Then let her speak," Nathaniel said. His voice was soft, yet every whisper stopped. Grant faced Evelyn. "Tell the king what the ledger confirms. Say that you have no name." Evelyn felt the weight of hundreds of eyes. She remembered the sound of silver scraping away her mother's letters. She remembered the metal tags hidden in Margaret's room and the names of women no one dared to mention. Fear rose in her throat, but beneath it was something steadier, something that had been waiting all her life to be heard. "Say it," Grant ordered. Evelyn lifted her face toward the throne. "My name is Evelyn Hale." The moment the words left her lips, every golden torch in the hall turned silver. Moonlight swept across the floor like water, gathering around her feet. The pendant rose from the stone without a hand touching it and floated between Evelyn and the king. Somewhere inside Nathaniel, the cursed wolf opened its eyes. Grant stumbled back, his confidence finally breaking. Nathaniel stood. "Bring me the silver ledger," he commanded, "and lock every door." The silver ledger was carried into the hall by two royal archivists and placed upon the stone table before Nathaniel. Its cover was bound in dark leather, its clasp marked with the crest of Greyhaven. Grant remained near the center of the room, but the confidence in his posture had begun to fade. Nathaniel opened the book slowly. The pages appeared ordinary at first, filled with names, dates, bloodlines, and ceremonial seals. Then he removed one glove and placed his palm against the parchment. Silver light spread beneath his hand. "By the authority of the Blackwood Crown," he said, "let every altered record return to its true form." The hall grew colder. Faint lines appeared between the written entries, like words rising from beneath deep water. One name became two. Two became 10. Soon, entire rows of erased identities glowed across the pages. Rose Bennett, Clara Wren, Hannah Cole. More names followed, each accompanied by land claims, family bonds, and inheritance rights that had been quietly transferred to Greyhaven leadership. A low murmur passed through the pack. Grant stepped forward. "Those records are incomplete. The Crown does not understand our local customs." Nathaniel lifted his eyes. "The Crown understands theft." His voice remained calm, but every word carried through the hall. These people did not lose their names. Their names were removed. Brielle looked toward her father, her face suddenly uncertain. Evelyn stood motionless, listening as the forgotten names filled the room. She thought of the metal tags hidden in Margaret's wooden box. These were not strangers anymore. They were proof that silence had been used as a weapon. Nathaniel turned another page. The silver light brightened until one entry appeared larger than the rest. "Evelyn Hale, last daughter of the Moonkeepers." The words shimmered above the paper. Beneath them, a second line slowly formed. "Wolf bond sealed by unlawful name severance." Evelyn felt the room tilt around her. "My wolf was not absent," she whispered. Nathaniel looked at her with something gentler than pity. "No, she was bound." Grant shook his head. "That bloodline ended years ago." "It ended because you buried it," Margaret said from the rear of the hall. The crowd parted as she entered, carrying the wooden box Evelyn had left in the tower. She placed it beside the ledger and opened the lid. The metal tags caught the silver firelight. Evelyn's mother discovered what he was doing, Margaret continued. She recorded every name she could save. She believed the Moonkeepers would one day restore them. Grant's expression hardened. You have no authority here. Margaret met his gaze. Neither do you. Nathaniel reached for Evelyn's pendant, which still floated above the stone floor. The moment his fingers closed around it, the silver ledger released a quiet tone, pure and clear as a distant bell. Evelyn felt warmth move through her chest. Not pain, not fear, recognition. Somewhere inside the silence she had carried since childhood, a presence stirred. A silver-gray wolf opened her eyes beneath a sky filled with stars. Evelyn drew in a trembling breath. The wolf did not speak, but Evelyn knew her name. Lyra. At the same instant, Nathaniel's shadowed wolf lifted its head within him and answered. The bond between them flashed across the hall like moonlight crossing glass. Nathaniel's gaze locked with hers. Grant saw it too. She belongs to Greyhaven, he said quickly. Whatever she is, the pack has the first claim. Nathaniel closed the ledger. A person is not property. He stepped away from the table and descended from the royal platform. The silver flames leaned toward him as he approached Evelyn. And no pack may claim the woman whose name it tried to erase. Grant's claim hung over the hall, but Nathaniel did not look away from Evelyn. He stopped a few feet before her, the silver pendant resting in his palm, while the newly awakened presence of Lyra moved through Evelyn like moonlight returning to a long dark room. She could feel the wolf now, quiet but certain, not demanding control, only reminding her that she had never been empty. Grant raised his voice. Greyhaven law gives the Alpha authority over every unclaimed Omega born within its borders. Nathaniel turned toward him. Royal law protects every citizen from unlawful bondage, falsified records, and the theft of identity. She was raised here. She was hidden here. The difference silenced the room. Grant's eyes moved toward the elders, searching for support. She owes this pack obedience. Evelyn felt the old fear rise inside her, the instinct to lower her gaze and become smaller. Then Lyra stood within her, not with anger, with dignity. Evelyn stepped forward before Nathaniel could answer for her. I owe kindness to those who gave it, she said. I owe gratitude to Margaret, who remembered me when others chose not to. I owe respect to the people whose names were taken before mine. But I do not owe obedience to the man who erased me. A faint shimmer passed over the silver ledger. The hidden names glowed brighter, as though the forgotten women had heard her. Grant's authority pressed against the hall, heavy and familiar, but Evelyn no longer felt herself bending beneath it. Lyra's presence surrounded her heart, warm as a winter fire. Kneel, Grant ordered. The single word had ruled her childhood. This time, it held no power. Evelyn remained standing. Nathaniel moved beside her, not in front of her. The gesture mattered. He was not hiding her behind his strength. He was declaring that her strength deserved space of its own. Grant stared at them. You cannot overturn Greyhaven tradition for a nameless servant. Nathaniel opened his hand. Evelyn's pendant lifted from his palm and returned to her, settling against her chest as gently as falling snow. She is not nameless. His silver eyes met hers. You are Evelyn Hale. The sound of her name in his voice carried no pity, no hesitation, and no secret. It crossed the hall, reached every arch, and returned like an oath. Lyra lifted her head within Evelyn. At the same moment, Nathaniel's shadowed wolf answered with a low, peaceful recognition. Silver light flowed between them, visible for one breath before it gathered around their joined shadows on the floor. Nathaniel's expression changed. The guarded distance he had worn since arriving softened into certainty. He faced Grant and the assembled pack. The bond has spoken, he said. Evelyn Hale is my mate. Every royal guard lowered to one knee. The Greyhaven elders followed more slowly, their faces pale beneath the silver flames. Brielle looked at Evelyn as though seeing her for the first time. Grant did not kneel. This changes nothing, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Evelyn looked toward the ledger, then toward the frightened servants, gathered along the walls. She thought of Rose Bennett, Clara Wren, Hannah Cole, and every name reduced to a hidden metal tag. It changes more than you understand, she replied. Margaret stepped beside the stone table and opened the wooden box. Then let the last Moonkeeper finish what her mother began. The silver letters across the ledger rose into the air, waiting for Evelyn to speak them aloud. Evelyn stepped toward the silver ledger, and the names suspended above it began to circle her like quiet stars. The hall waited for anger, punishment, perhaps even revenge. Grant Mercer had erased lives with ink and law, and now the power to undo him rested in the hands of the woman he had called nothing. Evelyn looked at the first glowing name. Rose Bennett, she said. The silver letters brightened, then returned to the page in a clear, permanent line. Somewhere near the back of the hall, an elderly servant covered her mouth as a faded pack mark reappeared on her wrist. My sister, she whispered. Evelyn read the next name. Clara Wren. A soft current moved through the room. One by one, hidden bonds awakened, lost inheritances returned to the record, and family lines once declared empty began to shine again. Hannah Cole, Rebecca Shaw, Grace Miller. Each name carried a life. Each life carried a memory Greyhaven had been ordered to forget. Nathaniel stood beside Evelyn in silence, watching her restore what the crown had failed to protect. His shadowed wolf remained calm, not because her power controlled it, but because her compassion reached the place fear never could. Grant finally stepped forward. Stop this. You do not understand what you are changing. Evelyn turned toward him. I understand exactly what was changed. Her voice was gentle, which made the truth inside it stronger. You taught this pack that a person could be erased if no one powerful remembered them. You were wrong. Grant looked toward the elders, but none met his eyes. Brielle slowly removed the silver crest from her shoulder and placed it on the floor. Others followed. The authority Grant had built through silence began to leave him without a shout, without a struggle, one quiet choice at a time. Margaret opened the oldest section of the ledger and pointed to a sealed passage beneath the Moonkeeper crest. There is one final right, she said. The last daughter may dissolve the pact bond entirely. A startled murmur filled the hall. Evelyn felt Lyra awaken more fully within her, offering strength without demanding vengeance. If Evelyn spoke the ancient words, Greyhaven would cease to exist before sunrise. Grant would lose everything, but so would children, servants, and families who had never known the truth. Nathaniel studied her face. The choice is yours, he said. He did not command her. He did not ask her to prove herself. He simply trusted her. Evelyn rested her hand upon the ledger. Silver light spread beneath her fingers, revealing the words that could end the pack. Then she closed the book. Greyhaven will remain, she said, but it will no longer belong to one man. She asked the crown to remove Grant from leadership, restore every stolen home, and allow the people to choose a new alpha under royal protection. Nathaniel inclined his head. It will be done. Grant stared at her in disbelief. After everything, you would spare what I built. Evelyn met his gaze without fear. I am protecting the people you used to build it. Royal officers stepped forward and removed the Greyhaven crest from Grant's coat. No one cheered. Evelyn had not chosen humiliation. She had chosen an ending that did not create another forgotten person. Nathaniel looked at her as though the mate bond had revealed only the smallest part of who she was. You had the power to make them all kneel, he said softly. Evelyn glanced at the restored names glowing in the ledger. I wanted them to stand. Beyond the high windows, the first pale light of dawn touched the forest. Margaret smiled through quiet tears. Then it is time for the Moonkeeper Oak. Nathaniel offered Evelyn his hand, but he did not take hers before she was ready. The bond may have named us, he said, but your future must still be chosen. Evelyn looked at his open palm as the entire hall waited for her answer. Evelyn looked at Nathaniel's open hand, then at the people gathered beneath the silver flames. All her life, others had decided where she could stand, when she could speak, and whether her name deserved to exist. This choice would belong to her. She placed her hand in his. Warmth moved between them, steady rather than overwhelming, and Lyra answered with a quiet certainty deep within her soul. Together they left the Royal Moon Hall as dawn spread over Greyhaven. Margaret followed with the restored ledger, while the royal officers remained behind to begin returning homes, titles, and family records to those who had lost them. No celebration rose from the hall. What happened there was too sacred for noise. Outside, frost covered the path leading into the eastern woods. The Moonkeeper Oak stood nearly a mile beyond the estate, ancient and wide enough that 10 people joining hands could not have circled its trunk. Silver leaves remained on its branches even in winter, catching the first sunlight like hundreds of small mirrors. Evelyn had seen the tree from a distance as a child, but Grant had forbidden her to approach it. Now the forest seemed to recognize her. Pale light moved over the roots as she stepped closer. Margaret opened the ledger beneath the oak and placed Evelyn's pendant on the restored page. The Moonkeepers never ruled through fear, she said. They remembered what power tried to forget. Nathaniel stood across from Evelyn, his dark coat stirring in the morning wind. There was no throne behind him, no royal guard at his shoulder, and no command in his expression. The mate bond is real, he said, but it does not own you. I will not ask you to leave one place of control only to enter another. Evelyn searched his silver eyes. For years, stories had described the Alpha King as distant, cursed, and impossible to reach. Yet the man before her had stood beside her without speaking over her. He had offered protection without demanding obedience. What happens if I say no? She asked. Your name remains yours. Your rights remain restored. Greyhaven remains under royal protection. Nothing will be taken from you. The answer loosened something inside her that no magic could have reached. Choice was the one gift she had never been given. Evelyn glanced back toward the estate. In the courtyard, Caleb stood beside his mother, smiling as Rose Bennett's sister held a metal tag against her heart. Servants who had once lowered their eyes were speaking their names aloud. Brielle was helping an elderly woman carry a box of returned records. Even Greyhaven looked different beneath the sunrise. Not healed. Not yet. But awake. Evelyn faced Nathaniel again. Then call me Evelyn, she said. Not because fate commands it. Not because the ledger proves it. Call me Evelyn because you see me. Nathaniel's expression softened. He lifted her hand, holding it with a care that made the moment feel like a promise rather than a claim. Evelyn. The oak's silver leaves stirred though the wind had stopped. Light traveled through the branches, across the restored ledger, and into the pendant above her heart. Lyra lifted her face toward the morning sky. Nathaniel's shadowed wolf answered, no longer restless, no longer alone. Evelyn chose to travel with him to Blackwood Citadel, not as property of the crown, but as the last Moonkeeper and a woman free to decide what came next. When they began walking toward the waiting royal carriage, Margaret spoke her name once more. Caleb repeated it, then Rose's sister, then the servants, the elders, and finally the entire courtyard. For the first time, Evelyn Hale was not a secret protected by whispers. Her name rose beneath the ancient trees, carried beyond Greyhaven, and entered the memory of a kingdom.